Phone rang at 6:15 in the morning, and I knew before I even picked it up that something was wrong. My son never called that early, not unless the house was on fire or someone had died. I sat up in bed, fumbled for my glasses on the nightstand, and answered on the third ring. "Dad." His voice was tight, controlled in that way he gets when he's trying not to sound desperate. "I need to talk to you. Can I come over?" "It's 6 in the morning, Cody." "I know. I'm sorry. It's important." I told him to come. I put on a pot of coffee and sat at the kitchen table in my robe, the same kitchen where I'd helped him with his homework 30 years ago, where his mother had made Sunday pancakes every week until the cancer took her 4 years back. The house felt bigger after she was gone. It always does. He showed up 20 minutes later with my daughter-in-law, Brooke, which surprised me. I'd half expected him to come alone the way he used to when he was a teenager and needed something. Just him and that sheepish look he'd get. But they both came in together, and she was the one who sat down first, like it was her meeting to run. I poured the coffee and waited. "Dad," Cody said, wrapping both hands around his mug, "we found the house." I looked at him, then at her, then back at him. "Okay," I said. "It's a good one. 3 bedrooms, 2 baths, good school district. The price is right, but we need to move fast. The sellers already had 2 offers." I asked him what the number was. He told me they needed $38,000 for the down payment, that if I could help, it would make the difference between getting this house and losing it. Now, I want to be clear about something. I'm 63 years old. I spent 31 years working as a foreman at a tool and die plant outside of Columbus. I drove the same truck for 11 years because I didn't believe in car payments. I packed my lunch every single day. I clipped grocery coupons until my coworkers teased me about it. My wife and I scrimped and saved and did without so that we could retire comfortable and leave something behind for our kids. What I had in savings was not a fortune, but it was mine, and it had cost me decades of patience to build it. $38,000 was a significant piece of that, but he was my son, my only son, and I could still picture him at age 4, running through the backyard sprinkler in his underwear because we couldn't afford a pool, laughing like nothing in the world could touch him. That image has followed me for 59 years. It still gets me. I told him I needed a few days to think about it. Brooke leaned forward then. She had this way of speaking that always made me feel like I was being managed, measured and professional, like she was presenting a quarterly report. She said the offer window was closing in 48 hours, that if we waited, the house would be gone, that this was a once-in-a-decade opportunity in that neighborhood. I looked at my son while she talked. He was staring at the table. I should have paid more attention to that. I said I'd help them. I said I'd get them the money. Cody hugged me on the way out, and it was a good hug, a real one, the kind I used to give him when he was scared of thunderstorms, and I'd tell him everything was going to be all right. I wanted to believe we were those people again. The next day I went to my bank and wired $38,000 to the escrow account they gave me. The woman at the bank asked me twice if I was sure, and I said yes, I was sure. It was for my son's house. They closed 3 weeks later. I wasn't there for the closing. Cody said it was a lot of paperwork, and they'd celebrate with me afterward. I told him that was fine. I'd wait to see the place once they'd settled in. I didn't want to crowd them. 6 weeks passed. Then 8. Brooke sent me a photo of the living room once it was painted, sage green with white trim, which looked nice, and I saved it to my phone. I asked Cody a couple of times when I might come by, and he always said soon. They were still getting organized. There were boxes everywhere. Just give it a little more time. I gave it more time. Then my friend Howard, who lives on the other side of town and has known Cody since he was in Little League, ran into them at a hardware store. He mentioned it when we had lunch the following week. Said he saw the two of them loading up a cart with shelving and light fixtures, that Brooke had been chatty and friendly, had even shown him pictures of the new place on her phone. Looks like they got a real nice house, Howard said. Great neighborhood out by Westbrook. You been out to see it yet? I said not yet. He looked at me a little funny. You helped them buy it, didn't you? That's what Cody told me. I did, I said. Huh. He let that sit for a moment. The deed in both their names? I told him I assumed so. I had never actually asked. Howard has known me long enough to say things straight. He said, "Larry, you might want to find out." I drove home that afternoon and sat in my armchair for a long time without turning on the television. Something had been nagging at me for weeks. A low, quiet feeling I'd been calling nothing, calling it old age worry, calling it grief because I missed my wife, and sometimes that made me read problems into empty spaces. But Howard's question had given the feeling a shape. I called my son that evening. He answered on the second ring, which I remember noticing because lately it sometimes took more. I asked him how things were going with the new house. He said, "Great, fantastic. They were really settling in." I said that was wonderful. I was glad. And then I said casually, "The way you do when you already suspect the answer, you have to put me down as an emergency contact now that you're homeowners. They'll need an address. Who's on the deed?" There was a pause. "Short, but there. Brooke and me," he said. "Both your names." "Yeah, Dad." Standard stuff. I said, of course. And I let it go, because I thought that was the right answer, because it should have been the right answer. But I couldn't sleep that night. At 2 in the morning, I got up, went to the kitchen, and called the county auditor's website, which in Ohio lets you look up property records for free. I typed in the address Howard had mentioned. Westbrook area, the hardware store receipt he'd seen. It didn't take long to find it. The property was listed under one name, Brooks. Just hers. No co-owner, no joint tenancy, no Cody. My son's name was not on the house I had paid $38,000 to help them buy. I sat in the kitchen until dawn. I made a second pot of coffee I didn't drink. I thought about my wife and what she would have said. She always had a sense about people, about Brooke specifically, and she'd said things to me over the years that I hadn't wanted to hear. I told her she was being protective. I told her she just needed to give the girl time. She'd given me a look she was famous for, the kind that meant she'd revisit this later. She never got the chance. I spent 3 days deciding how to handle it. I thought about calling a lawyer, which felt dramatic. I thought about calling Cody directly and asking him to explain, which felt like picking a fight before I had all the facts. I thought about doing nothing, which felt like exactly the kind of thing that had gotten me here. I decided to drive out to the house. I didn't call ahead. It was a Tuesday afternoon. I pulled into the driveway behind Brooke's car. Cody's truck wasn't there, and rang the doorbell. She answered in maybe 30 seconds, wearing a nice sweater, hair done like she'd been expecting someone. Her expression shifted when she saw me. Just slightly. One of those shifts you only catch if you're looking for it. "Oh," she said. "Larry, we weren't expecting you." I was in the area, I said, which was not true but felt like the right thing to say. Thought I'd finally see the place. She let me in. The house was nice. I won't pretend otherwise. She let me in. The house was nice. I won't pretend otherwise. The sage green looked better in person. The kitchen had new countertops, granite or something close to it, which I noticed because countertops like that run $4,000 or $5,000 at least, and they hadn't mentioned doing any upgrades. She gave me a tour. She was pleasant and warm the way she gets when she's performing pleasant and warm, which I had learned to distinguish from the real thing. I admired everything I was supposed to admire. At the end, I sat down in the living room, and I said, "This is all in your name, isn't it?" The warmth went out of the room. She said she didn't know what I meant. I said I'd looked up the property records, that it was a public record, that there was nothing unusual about a father looking into a home he'd just put $38,000 toward. She sat across from me and did not speak for a moment. Then she said it was a financial planning decision, that putting it only in her name protected them from complications related to Cody's student loans, that it was something their accountant had recommended, that it was technically better for both of them this way. I asked her if Cody knew his name wasn't on the deed. She said he'd agreed to it. I asked her if I would have agreed to give them the money had I known that. She didn't answer that one. I thanked her for the tour and I drove home. My hands were steady on the wheel. I was surprised by that. I'd expected to be angry, the hot kind, the kind that fogs everything, but what I felt was colder than that. Heavier. The specific weight of realizing you've been handled. Cody called me that night. He'd heard from Brooke. His voice had that tight, controlled quality again, the one I'd heard on the morning they came to ask me for money. He said I shouldn't have gone over there without calling first. I said he was right. I should have called. Then I said, "Is your name on the deed?" He was quiet. "Cody, it's complicated, Dad. It's a yes or no question." More silence. Then, "No." I asked him why he'd told me it was both their names. He said he hadn't wanted to make it into a big thing, that it was just paperwork, that it didn't change anything about the house being theirs together. I said, "Son, I gave you $38,000. I gave it to both of you for your home, for something that would be yours and would be a foundation for your family. And what you did was take that money and deed the home entirely in someone else's name without telling me. That is not paperwork. That is not a small thing." He said Brooke was his wife, that it was the same thing as both their names. I said it was not the same thing. I said if it were the same thing, both names would be on it. He got quiet again. Then he said he was sorry I felt that way. I told him I wasn't calling because I felt a way. I was calling because I deserved the truth about what happened to my money. And what happened to it was that I was not told the whole story before I handed it over. And now someone I love has a $38,000 asset in his marriage that carries only his wife's name. He said they were fine, that his marriage was solid, that I was worrying for nothing. I said I hoped he was right. We hung up and I didn't sleep again. I lay in the dark, thinking about my wife, thinking about what it means to build something over a lifetime, and what it means to hand it to people who see it differently than you do. 2 months later, Cody called again. Different tone this time. He said the property taxes had come in on the house, and they were higher than they'd budgeted. He asked if I might be able to help, just this once, just a few thousand to get through the first year while they found their footing. I sat with the phone against my ear and looked out the kitchen window at the backyard. The same yard where he'd run through that sprinkler. Same oak tree, older now, thicker through the middle, which was true of both of us. I said, "Cody, whose name is on that house?" He sighed. "Dad, I'm just asking a simple question. Whose name is on the deed?" A beat. "Brooks." Then I said, "Brooke will need to figure out the taxes." He started to say something and I let him say it. I didn't interrupt. When he was done, I said, "I love you. I'll always love you. But that house isn't something I have any stake in, apparently. And so it's not something I'm able to keep funding. I hope you understand that." He said I was being unfair. I said maybe I was. I said I'd think about it. I've thought about it every day since, and my answer hasn't changed. What I know is this. I'm 63 years old. I worked my whole life to have something. My wife and I did it together, and she's gone now, and I'm doing the rest of it alone. And I am not going to spend whatever time I have left watching my savings disappear into something I was lied to about. I sent Cody a letter last month, a real one, on paper, the way my father would have done it. I told him I loved him without condition. I told him I was not walking away from him. I told him the door was always open for him to come and talk to me, really talk the way we used to. But I also told him that I would not be contributing to expenses on a property that I have no part of, and that I needed him to know, clearly, in writing, that what happened with that down payment was something I would not repeat. He hasn't written back yet. Howard came over for dinner last Friday, and we talked about all of it. He said I handled it right. I said I didn't know about that. I said I just handled it the only way I could live with. Some nights I still sit in this kitchen and think about what I should have asked before I signed off on that wire transfer, what I should have said, whether any of it would have changed anything. But you can't rewind the years that are already spent. All you can do is decide how you're going to spend the ones you have left. I plan on spending mine a little more carefully. I keep thinking about the oak tree in my backyard, the one Cody used to climb when he was 7, before he knew enough to be afraid of heights. It's thicker now than it was then. Both of us are. And some mornings I stand at the kitchen window and look at it and think about how long it takes something to grow, and how quickly you can stop noticing it's there. That's what I got wrong, I think. Not the money. The noticing. I spent so many years making sure Cody had what he needed that I stopped paying attention to what he was learning from that. When you hand someone everything without asking them to account for it, you're not just giving them a thing, you're teaching them that things come without cost, without honesty, without the basic decency of looking someone in the eye and telling them the truth before you take what they're offering. I didn't see that happening because I didn't want to. It's easier to call it love. What happened with that house was a consequence, not an accident. Cody didn't wake up one morning and decide to mislead me. It built slowly, the way these things do. One small assumption allowed, one uncomfortable question left unasked, one moment where I could have said, wait, let's slow down, and instead said, of course, whatever you need. I was so afraid of being the kind of father who withholds that, I became the kind of father who never asked for the truth. Those two failures look very different from the outside. They land in the same place. What I've had to sit with is the understanding that integrity, real integrity, the kind that holds up under pressure, isn't just about what you do when people are watching. It's about what you do when no one is. Brooke put that house in her name alone and said nothing because she calculated that I wouldn't find out. Or that if I did, I'd be too uncomfortable to push back. She wasn't entirely wrong about that. I almost didn't push back. I almost let it go because the alternative felt like losing my son, and I have already lost too many people I love to go looking for more loss. But here's what I've learned, at 63, the hard way. Avoiding a hard conversation doesn't protect a relationship. It just delays the damage and compounds the interest. The clear-headed thing, the thing I wish I'd done from the start, was to ask questions before I opened my wallet. Not because I didn't trust my son, but because trust and verification are not opposites. They never were. A man who loves his family and thinks carefully about how he uses what he's spent his life building is not a suspicious man. He's a responsible one. I confused those two things for too long, and the part that required the most from me, the part I'm still working on, was not letting any of this turn me bitter. Bitterness would have been the easiest response. It would have felt righteous even. But bitterness doesn't build anything. It just sits in you and takes up space that could belong to something better. I sent that letter to Cody because I wanted him to know I wasn't going anywhere. I also sent it because I needed him to know that love without honesty is just a comfortable arrangement, and I'm too old and too tired to keep comfortable arrangements going at the cost of my own dignity. The door is open. It's always going to be open. But I'm done signing checks I wasn't given the full truth about.